because of your work and your writing, I think a lot of people assume that they know what you were like as a child, what your childhood was like, as painful as it was. Do they really know what your childhood was like, what Maya was like as a child?
Well, they would have to, I think, have been violated, have been molested. And then had the person killed. I mean, the person who did the rape, in my case, was killed. And the police came to my maternal grandmother's house while I was on the floor playing a game with my brother.
And you were 8 years old.
I was 8. By that time, I was about 7 and a half. And the policeman told my grandmother, within my hearing, that the man had been found dead, and it seemed he'd been kicked to death. It so startled me. It traumatized me. I decided not to speak. Then my voice might just go out and kill people randomly. So I stopped speaking for 6 years.
You communicated with Bailey,
my brother,
with your brother, didn't you?
Occasionally.
Yes.
Occasionally. But he was my heart. I mean, I knew I loved him too much. It wouldn't hurt. I couldn't hurt him. My voice could not hurt him. But even with him, I was, oft times, months would go by, and I wouldn't speak. But some years passed, years and years. I wrote all the time. And
why? Why did you write?
Well, because I read. A black lady in my town took me to the library. It was a black school, high school. I mean, the school was from there was no kindergarten, 6th grade to the 10th or 11th. She took me there, took me to the library, and she said, I want you to read all the books in this place. Start at A, and I'll come back and see you when you get to BR. So I did. I read every book in the place. It seemed vast. I know now that just one of the libraries in my home has more books than that. But it seemed vast. I don't say I understood everything, but I read everything. And I found I loved poetry. And I loved the poetry in the church. I loved to hear, I still do, to hear black ministers speak in that imagery and that melodic, mellifluous cadence and rhythm. I'm still enchanted all these years later. So
you read all of those books?
I read everything, yes. And then Mrs. Flowers, her name was, had some contact with the white school. She didn't live in Stamps. She had a house in Stamps. She lived in Little Rock. But she would come about every 3 or 4 months to the village, and she would come up the road carrying arms of books. And she was so beautiful. She was very black, that beautiful color, that dusky brown black that looks, if you put your finger, it would peel. Oh, God. And she spoke like that. You know, the way old Southern black ladies. I mean, I'm an old Southern black lady. I don't speak like that. But like Dr. Dorothy Height. Oh, yes, my dear. Ooh. All the plums in her voice. So she'd come up and she'd say, my dear, I have books for you. These are all for you. You may come and see me at tea time. And she'd make tea cookies and read to me. So I just read everything and wrote poetry, voluminous albums and journals. The worst poetry, east of the Rockies. But I wrote it.
Is Miss Flowers the one who I read that she said that poetry is music for the voice?
She told me that.
So
That's
wonderful.
how she started me to reading again. At 12 and a half, when I was 12 and a half, I had a little tablet, which, like a penny tablet, a nickel tablet. And my grandmother took her pocket knife, she called it, and made a groove in a number 2 pencil, tied a string into that groove, and another string into the spindle of the tablet. So I communicated totally with this I just wrote. So Mrs. Flowers had me at her house, and she had made tea cookies about that big, and the house was redolent with the aroma of vanilla and little cinnamon or mace. And she said, "You do not like poetry?" "Oh, my dear, no, you do not. You will never love it." I wrote, "Yes, ma'am, I do." She wouldn't look at my tablet. First time in 5 years almost. She said, "You will never like it. No, you will never, until you feel it come across your tongue, through your teeth, over your lips. You will never love poetry." Ah, I thought she was taking my dearest friend. So I ran from her. And my grandmother owned the only black-owned store in the town. So Mrs. Flowers had to come there from time to time. She'd come down. She and my grandmother are contemporaries. And she would point at me in front of Mama. Now that's really bad manners to point at a person. You know, black people say, "Don't put your finger in my face." I can take many things, but don't. She pointed at me in front of Mama. Who I thought was God, really. She said, "You'll never like it. Never, 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 no." She harassed me for about 6 months. And finally, I went under the house to see if I could sustain, because even talking to Bailey, I would just say something, little bitty things. To hear it, not to make it up in my head. I was making up the sound. I thought this is how it would sound. But then to say, I know what the caged bird feels, me, when the sun is bright on the upland slopes, when the wind blows soft through the springing grass and the river floats like a sheet of glass, when the first bird sings and the first bud opes, and the faint perfume from its chalice steals. I know what the caged bird feels. To hear it, my lands, oh my goodness.
And that brought you back?
I continued, yes, to speak. And Bailey helped a lot. And a year or so later, I went back to California to live with my mother, with our mother. And she knew, too, that it was dangerous for me to become silent. That's still so, all these years later, 60-odd years later. It is still so. If I'm really shaken, I stop speaking. And I then bring myself out. I sing, I speak loudly and firmly, and recite Poe and Shakespeare and James Weldon Johnson and all, and do it. Because mutism is like a drug. It's so addictive.
What should young people know about Malcolm X?
About Malcolm X?
Mm-hmm. That perhaps they don't know, that you have a particular perspective on?
Well, this is going to sound strange and maybe even frivolous, but it isn't. they should know he had an incredible sense of humor. They should know that about Martin, too. Martin King had an incredible sense of humor. One of the things some historians do, and one of the mistakes made, is the historian, and social historian in particular, oftentimes recreate the man or woman as larger than life, which puts the person beyond the reach of a young person. So, if Malcolm and Martin and Abraham Lincoln and Kennedy, if Dr. Du Bois and Mary McLeod Bethune are beyond their reach, then they say, well, there's nothing I can do. Those people were bigger than life. I'm just myself. I was born in Boston. I'm just myself. I was born in Kansas City. What can I do? So the wisest thing is to make the people accessible. Show their wiles and their wits and their warts. Show them. So a person can say, you know, given the same circumstance, I think I'd have done that too. I'd like to think I could have done that. So both men, I knew Malcolm much better than Dr. King. But Malcolm was a faithful man, great loving person who really loved black people. And then one of the most courageous persons I've ever known. Courage is the most important of all the virtues, because without courage you can't practice any other virtue consistently. You can't be consistently kind, consistently fair, merciful, just, loving. You cannot. Malcolm, having said that all whites were blue-eyed devils, all this whites are that, he went to Mecca, and he came to West Africa, and he said, I have met white-skinned, blue-eyed men who I openly called brother. I was wrong. Now, it takes a great deal of courage to say that, even when the person feels that they were wrong. I see this today. People who don't believe what they say, but because they have the habit of saying it, and are known as saying it, they're afraid to say, listen, everybody, you remember what I said last week? I don't believe that. So among other things, his courage and his exquisite sense of humor. Young people should be reading. Read the books. Read the books. I had written about a very rough time at 18. I had Caged Bird, which was a national bestseller, and the first book of poetry, Cool Drink of Water, was nominated for the Pulitzer. And I went on to a national show, and the woman who interviewed me, who I knew slightly, said, Maya Angelou, how does it feel to know you're the first black woman to have a national bestseller, nonfiction, and second book nominated for the Pulitzer, and to know that at 18 you were a prostitute? It was like a kick in the stomach. However, there is this. You must always be careful of who you call out. You must be. When she said that, I said, but there are many ways to prostitute oneself, and you know a lot about that, don't you, dear? Whereupon they went to break. Yes. Whereupon her co-host came and concluded the interview. But I said I had noticed that so many parents tell their children, either implicitly or explicitly, that they've never done anything wrong, Oh my goodness, if I had done that, my daddy would have killed me. Oh no, I couldn't do that. That would hurt the family. So the young person thinks, oh my goodness, I must be the lowest thing in the world. Because not only do I do that, I want to do it. So I wrote the book, Gather Together in My Name, to tell young people who've been told that their parents have no skeletons in the closet. In fact, they have no closets. That I would admit where I've been. And they could see that. And they can realize that you may encounter many defeats, but you must not be defeated. It may even be necessary to encounter the defeats so you can know who you are, how you can rely upon yourself, where you can pull yourself up from. So I had written the book just before I sent it off to the publisher. I called my mother, my brother, and my son. My husband had said, write it. I said, people will hate me. He said, write it. If it's true, a number of young black women and black men, and white men and white women, young Asian men, Spanish-speaking, have tried to reach an exit and found the doors not only locked, but no doorknobs on the doors. And they have done many things. It's important that you write it. So I called the family, and I said, there's this section you must know. If it's too painful, I'll take it out. But let me tell you why I want to write it. My mom, as soon as I finished this section, stood up and said, is it ready for the post office? I'll take it myself. And my brother, who is my heart, and said, you never have been a liar. I love you for it. But of course, my heart was my son, who was 20. He got up from the floor and came and sat beside me and took me in his arms. He said, you're great, Mother. You are great. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
That had to be an unbelievably
It's
magical
really
moment.
magical,
For you.
absolutely.
Yes.
But on the book tour, I stopped in Cleveland, Ohio. When that book came out, department stores still had book departments in them. So I stopped there to sign books. And I was signing, the line was long, and your name, and suddenly I looked, and there were two hands, black, with false fingernails, young hands. And I followed the hands up, and there was false hair, lots of it, and to a young face, about 18, false eyelashes. It was 10 o'clock in the morning. She's a young street prostitute. She leaned over. She had heard me on television. She leaned over. She said, you give me hope. Now, if no one else said anything to me, ever, it's sufficient.
Does it bother you that a lot of young black people today have no idea what that was like?
Somebody dropped the ball. You see, a generation of people thought, well, I'm going to send my kids to Bryn Mawr and Brown and to James and to Mason, and I'll send them to Princeton and Smith, and Mount Holyoke. I'll send them to Yale and Harvard, and everything will be all right. And so I don't have to tell them about how awful it was in the 30s and 40s and even 50s. They don't have to know that. Wrong. It is very clear. He, she, who does not learn from his, her history is doomed to repeat it and repeat it and repeat it ad nauseum.
Is that what we're doing now?
Absolutely. Ad nauseum.
We are beginning to repeat the same.
So it is. This is why this project, why I said yes when I understood what you wanted to do. Absolutely yes, yes. I'm a very good fountain of information, and I have no modesty at all, none. It's a learned affectation, very dangerous. Modesty is put on from without, very dangerous. Because life will slam a modest person against a wall, and the modesty will drop off faster than a G-string will drop off a stripper. Humility is the thing one wants. Humility comes from within out, not out, on. So humility says someone was here before me, and I am here. I have something to do. I too have my responsibilities. And there'll be someone coming behind me who I must prepare the way for.
So how do we change? How do we break
By
the pattern?
this is absolutely, in every way possible. Don't stop talking. Don't stop putting your hands on the children. I do that. I put my hands on the children, the black children, the white children. I put my hands. So to such a degree that Elmo from Sesame Street was interviewed on the Today Show, and Matt Lauer asked, who you've interviewed or you talked to kings and queens and princesses, presidents, who do you like most? And he said, Dr. Maya Angelou.
And that's where our hope is.
Here in Washington, D.C., there's a school, the Maya Angelou School. And we accept children who've been in trouble. They only those who've come through the correctional system can go to the Maya Angelou School. And when the young woman, there had been a contest how to name the school, I'd been a supporter of the school. And I was there, as was Senator Dominici and, other senators, and Donna Shalala and Dr. Haidt and Secretary Herman and lots and lots of cabinet folks. And this young woman got up and she said, well, I won, and they told me I have to read this letter, my winning letter. And I'm paraphrasing her, because she then at that time had that same lazy tongue. So she said, well, I think school ought to be named Dr. Maya Angelou. And why? Because Dr. Angelou's been down here. Every time she comes here, she tries to pull us up. And she's been down low. She's been low as we are, And she's now up there. I mean, she's up there. She's up over all you white folks here. But Dr. Haidt said, woo! But they always pull the children, all of them. Don't let one slide. Not one. Not one Asian one Spanish speaking, one white one Jewish one. Pull them.
But don't many of those young people who went to Mount Holyoke and went to Smith and Yale, et cetera, don't a number of them say, look, I don't need any.
Well, that's all right.
I don't need to be pulled.
Too bad. Well, if they don't. But I mean those who didn't, because they feel they didn't, they then don't give it to their children. But then they didn't get it. Their parents are the ones who sent them off to the white schools with the idea that this would make them even, well, and normal, and well, and white. Well, it's not. Going to school will not make you white. I have 53 doctorates, which means I've been to 53 universities. Hasn't had any effect at all on my complexion. So, no, it's not.
So these parents, and I know some of these parents, the ones that you're talking about. They feel that they're protecting their children from the horrors of the past, that the children don't need to know about what it was like before the Civil Rights Movement. They feel they don't need to know what the Civil Rights Movement was like.
Well, too bad. That's ignorant. It's just ignorance. I'm sorry, but it's ignorant. One can have enormous education and be blitheringly ignorant. Now that is blitheringly ignorant. He who does not learn from his history is doomed to repeat it. See, the 40s and 50s were okay. But the 60s, whoa! The 60s, oh my dear. And the 70s are delicious.
Now this goes against, American society's perception that it's all about youth, youth, youth.
No.
You're saying no.
No. Oh no, that's too sad. People don't count on some of the best years when they really, for the most part, have found their niche, have the home anyway, for the most part have the profession, have earned already incredible awards and appreciations. Person doesn't have to worry about pregnancies unwanted or unclaimed. I mean, really, when you know how to handle yourself and how to be safe and clean and happy and beautiful. What? And you can give that up because at somebody else's whim and out of someone else's ignorance. Never.
So you're having a good time.
I'm having a wonderful time.
What would you say, on a personal level, what would you consider your greatest achievement?
My son. Raising my son.
Without hesitation?
Oh, no. There's no contest.
No contest. No contest.
No.
Okay.
He's told me that he said, Mom, everything I learned about parenting, I learned from you. And I was saying that his son had told him that he's a great dad. He said, well, I learned it all from a great parent. So, of course, anytime they say it, I have now great-grands. I have 2 great-grands. One is about 11 months, 10 months. But one, the girl, is Kaylin, and when she was about 2 and a half, she is now 4, thank you, and quite all of that. But when she was about 2 and a half, they'd come and spend summer with me on the Cape, and her mother and father would say, good morning, grandmother, and I'd say, good morning, Colin, good morning, Jessica, and then she said, my morning, Emma. So I would say, good morning, honey. About the 4th day she came down, she looked at me, she said, good morning, Grandma, honey. I said, how do you want the will in small bills? Used bills? Stock? Oh, I have not written the great American book. I mean, there are people who say that, but I'm working at it. Oh, my dear. I'm going to direct a movie this summer. And the last one with Wesley Snipes and Alfred Woodard did very well.
Down in the Delta. It's
Down
wonderful.
in the Delta. Wonderful. I want to do this better. I want to be more deft, more. I'm in the midst of writing, not in the midst, I'm early days in writing a cookbook because I'm a serious cook. So I'm a good, serious writer. So I don't know if those two go together. It doesn't mean that follows that I'll be a good writer of a cookbook, but.
And you're about to publish your 5th? Sixth.
And the final autobiography.
Why do you say it's the final?
Well, because I come up to writing Cage Bird. And I refuse to write about writing. I won't do that. That'd be bore people's toenails off. No, but it doesn't mean I will stop writing. I'll certainly do some more essays. I'm going to finish this cookbook, and then I'll see. I was telephoned by Tommy Thomason, who, with his wife, Linda Bloodworth Thomason, were the writers and producers of Designing Women. So when I heard that he was on the phone, I thought he wanted me to write a segment or two. I write some things for different television programs. And he said, no. He said that President Clinton was told that he could have a poet, any poet in the world, to write a poem for his inauguration. And he asked if you would. I said, yes, I will. And thank him, please. And he said, and he'd like you to read it at the inauguration. I said, yes, thank you. And I began to pray, of course. Of course. I mean, you have to ask for help from somewhere. So I was just listening. B.B. Winans, you know B.B.
Mm-hmm.
B.B. was at my house last week, and he was told a story about Humpty Dumpty. He said all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty Dumpty together again. He said, you know why? Because they went to the wrong king. So I asked for help at the source of creativity, the creator itself, to help me now. So it was known that somebody did a press release that I'd been asked to write this poem. So I would get on the planes and people would ask me, good morning, finish the poem yet? As if I was writing a letter. Oh my goodness. They think that because I think that I am dour and solemn, not at all. I mean, just the opposite. I never trust people who don't laugh, who act as if they put airplane glue on the back of their hands and stuck them to their foreheads. What? No. Mm-mm. They didn't come to make a difference. If you've come to make a difference, you laugh as often as possible. Because the telephone will ring and inform you of some information that will make you weep. The doorbell will ring and you'll hear something. You turn on the television and say, my God. Pick up the newspaper. Whew. Walk in the street and your car has been stolen. No. So as often as possible, you laugh. Don't force it. But the Bible says a cheerful spirit is good medicine. And we are just now finding in medical research that that is true. It may be why black people have lived so long and have fewer wrinkles and so forth. Really. And just now, a medical research institute is named for me. And it's just now being established as a part of Bowman Gray Medical School. And it's the Maya Angelou Medical Research Institute on Minority Health. So we will study sickle cell anemia, high blood pressure, diabetes, and HIV, AIDS, of course. And what is this? What is the mystery behind laughter? What is it? That it allows the factories in the body, the various glands, to create more endorphins, which go around the body. I think of them as little visiting physicians knocking at the door. You okay in there? Would you like to have a couple of aspirin? looking after things. Fine. Yes, it's true. So I'd like to see lots of research in that. I also don't trust people who don't love themselves. No, it's very dangerous. People say, I love you. Oh, I hate myself, but I love you. No, you cannot love a person if you don't love yourself. You can want her or want him, want to possess something. But to love liberates. And the African saying is, be careful when a naked person offers you a shirt. Thank you.